Grant Cameron, one of the greatest researchers in the field of ufology, and he is our next guest with our split show on Coast to Coast AM. And tonight on Coast to Coast, we're going to talk about UFOs. What did some people know? And how did they know it? Grant Cameron, of course, is a Canadian researcher. He has researched a major UFO flap in 1975, 76, as well as the early Canadian government investigation into flying saucers, including the MJ-12 documents and its connection to the former president of Penn State University. Grant works now, leading him into research areas about UFOs surrounding the President of the United States, the White House, and also senators, congressmen. He's back on Coast to Coast. Grant Cameron. Grant, how are you?
Just good, George. Thanks for having me on and listening to some of my tales.
I'm looking forward to this as well. What have you been up to lately?
What I've been up to lately is I was down at UFO Congress in Phoenix because we live up in the cold here. So we go down and enjoy your nice warm weather down there. I was at Congress in Phoenix, and while I was there, I'd heard about the Senator Barry Goldwater UFO papers, did some investigation, and found out that they had 3 files, possibly 300 pages of UFO material. And so just before I went down 2 days early, if the government isn't working on this, it's not important. It's absolute nonsense. They have to be working on this. And the prime example is the U.S. military has always been ahead in military technology all over the world. There was only one time they weren't. World War II, they had the atomic bomb and they were going to use it against Japan. But in Europe, they were outdone in technology, and that was the V-1 rockets coming out of Germany. The Americans had not worked on rocket technology yet, and the V-1s were being shot over, landing on London. You had the king, the queen, the prime minister, all the people in bomb shelters at night.
Oh, yeah, panicked.
Nothing they could do to stop it. And during that period, the science advisor to Roosevelt, and this is a true story, science advisor to Roosevelt goes and gives a briefing to then Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces in Europe, General Dwight Eisenhower. And the guy that gave the briefing was Vannevar Bush. And Vannevar Bush was the technological czar during World War II. He was in charge of all the scientific programs for all the developments, the radar, proximity fuse, homing torpedo, atomic bomb, all the inventions of World War II that the Americans did. This guy was running it. He was the top scientist. And he was also identified in the 1950 top secret Canadian government memo as being the guy that was running the UFO program. So we go back to World War II, and you got to see, just before Roswell happens, just before they find out about the UFOs, this is what happens. He goes into this briefing with Eisenhower, and he says, I got to tell you about this V-1 thing. They're launching these rockets, and we've got no defense against them, and they're dropping on London, and we've got people in bomb shelters. And he goes through the whole thing about, we found these, and this is the technology we think they have. We haven't worked on the technology. We're getting to work on this. And at the end of the briefing, Eisenhower looks at him and says, you know, you're scaring the hell out of me. What are we going to do? And all Vannevar Bush says is the only thing we can do is bomb their production facilities to slow it down and hope that we win the war before they get this thing into full production. Because the Americans don't have the technology. And that's the whole key is that if you're the president, and I'm the science advisor, and I come to you, I say, you know, President Norrie, here's the situation. We're working on the Iranian program here, and we've suddenly discovered, our intelligence has discovered, they're really not working on the nuclear weapon. It's a cover for UFOs. They've been working on UFOs all the time, Mr. President. And the Iranians, we've determined that they actually have the technology, and they're flying around the United States of America right now, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, Mr. President. And, Mr. President, we've also discovered that they've got the abduction technology. And I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. President, but we believe you're being abducted. And so then what's the President going to say? He's going to say, well, what the heck's going on? I mean, what are we going to do?
Yeah, stop it. How do we stop it?
We haven't worked on it, Mr. President. Give us $500 million a year, $500 billion a year. We started working on it yesterday, and we'll get to it. And he says, well, how long is it going to take? And he said, well, it took the Iranians 65 years to develop it, so we're a little bit smarter than the Iranians. Give us 50 years, Mr. President. We'll develop the UFO technology. That's assuming that we're not working on it. Lead time in a battle, especially in today's type of battle, it can be over in 2 days. Because if your plane is 10% faster than the other guy's plane, if you've got the bomb that they can't stop, if you've got a missile that they can't stop, the war is over. You can wipe out all their troops.
That's right.
Away.
If you use a Grant, hold on for a second. We're going to hit this break. We're going to come right back, and also I'm going to mention a 1988 interview on Larry King's then radio show where he was talking to Goldwater.